Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're Masechta Yevamot daf Ayin Vav. We are going to begin on Ayin Vav with Aleph, the second line from the top. Rabbi Huda Shmuel. Nikav v'nistam. Let's say on a person's male member there is a small hole, v'nistam, and then it got closed up. Rashi says b'chol shu, even a little bit. However, a nicker, and it's not so recognizable, this hole. So it depends. Kol she'ilu nikre v'nikra apostle, v'yilav kosher. If, let's say, it would tear, it would cause the tear to go up, and then it would be puzzle, v'yilav kosher. If, let's say, it would not cause a tear, then it's kosher. So Havibo Rava, Heicha, where exactly is this happening? Ilim lamatim atara. If it's happening on the bottom of the atara, I feel nichras nami. Even if it's torn, also it's not a problem. El mi'atar atzma. It's talking about the atar itself. Itmar nami. Omer Rav Mari bar Mar Omer Marukva Omer Shmuel Nika ba'atara atzma. It's talking specifically on the atar itself, on the crown. V'nistam, there's a hole, but it was closed up. Koshil nikre v'nikra apostle v'yilav kosher. So again, if it tears, it's possible. It's not. This person will be not able to enter the Kahal Hashem. Otherwise, it's fine. So the question is, how do we check this? Says Rashi, how do we check this person out? Ki asila kaman lu'urye. He wants to know whether or not he's allowed to get married. So the only way he can do it is to see if actually he can have a seminal emission, and if he's able to actually produce zera. So how do we do that? So Amalei Masinin Nahama Chamima, we take warm barley bread, Manchinan le abe pukre, and we put it on his backside, on his anus. Mikre, he'll end up, because of the heat, will cause a seminal emission. V'chazinan le, and then we'll be able to figure it out. So Omer Rabbi Ottawa Koliyama Yaakov Avinu Havoy Dechsibe. This is a person that this has never happened in his entire life, that we need to do all this. Take some women's garments, and he'll have a hear about a woman, and then he'll have he'll end up seeing zera that way. So Amarav Atu what? Koliyama Barzila Hagiladihu. Everyone is like Barzila Hagiladi, in which he was steeped in immorality, as the pasuk says, as Rashi quotes, I'm so old, I can't even taste anything. The Gemara Shabbos quotes that he was actually shata b'zima, lafika kafsul of zikna. That actually made him older, and it says that even someone who's 90 years old, bas sadi v'tartin shnin, 92, and was able to taste foods in the house of Rabbi. So it's not because you lost your taste buds at a certain age. It's because of your, it's because you are shuta b'zima. So is this what we're talking about? El machvarta kadeshtin mikara. So rather, we can answer like we said before. Tanabam, nikav posel. If there's a hole, then that individual is posel. Bimneshu shaises, says Rashi, because it shoots out. And it says in yorkechetz, it's not going to come out like an arrow. And Kaimalon says in Chagiga, shech v'zer shein yorkechetz in a mazriya. The only way you could actually produce is only if it drips out, but it actually has to shoot out. Nistam kosher. If, let's say, it is closed up, kosher, and then issue moil because they have a kid. He can have children. This is a possibility, if it closed up, that even though before it was a hole, it's possible, but now it's kosher. If you have like this membrane which is covering up the lung, that is what it's come to exclude. So now the Gemara asks, what can we do again in this situation? What refuah can we do? How can we close up this hole? So Maisinan Sa'arta, they would bring like this barley, sartinon and they would scrape it off all around. Umaisinan tarba, they would get some fats. Shaifinan, and they would smear it onto the wound. And then umaisinan shum shina gamla, they would then take this big ant, nachtinon, and would bite him. Upaskinon le and then we would cut the ant's head off. Somehow this would cause the hole to close up. Madavka se'arta, has to be this like barley, abel perzala. If it is metal or iron, steel, then mizraf zarf, it's going to cause, according to one lashon of Rashi, it's going to be nefach, it's going to swell up. The hanimili katan, that's always a small hole. Of a gadol miklufi miklaf, it's going to peel off, and it's basically not going to work. Omer Rabba bar Rav Huna hametel mayim mishnei mikaimos pasul. A person who urinates out of the two areas is also going to be pasul. Omer Rabba leisalchas aloi kivra aloi ka'ababra hada amran. So ka'ababra hada amran. Abba di Omer Rav Huna nashim hamisayulais. This is Gemara in Shabbos. Zubazu psul sakuna. Women that rub up against each other, derech tashmish of zachar nekeva, that is going to passel them to marry a kahuna, and because that's considered to be a form of znus. The feel Rebbe Lezer the omer panoi habal panuya shaloshem isha sasa zayna tiny mila ish. The only time we say a man and a woman shaloshem isha sasa zayna, that's by a man. But isha pritzus alma, it's just considered to be pritzus. It's not going to actually passel the kahuna. Next Mishnah, Patsua Daka Kroshavcha, which we were talking about already in the first Mishnah Daf Ayin, Mutarin Bigyaris Meshachreres. So even though they're usher to come to Kal Hashem, they're mutter to marry a Gyaris and also a Meshachreres, a freed slave, because they're not considered to be part of Kahal Hashem. They can't enter Kahal Hashem, but they can marry them. A Gyaris is not considered to, according to this opinion, being part of Kahal Hashem. They just can't come to Kahal Hashem. So, Bo Minim Rav Sheshis, Patsua Daka Kayin, if you have a Patsua Daka Kayin, now we know if he's just a regular kosher Kayin, he would be usher to a Giyaris and Meshachreres because she's Mishum Zaina, Shenivla Mekaidim. We assume that she already had Znus before, so therefore she's considered to be a Zaina, and therefore you cannot marry her. However, the question is, what if it's a Psua Daka Kayin who himself is usher to marry Israelis? Can he marry Giyaris? Ma'u be Giyaris Meshachreres. Again, a regular Kohen cannot marry Giyaris. However, maybe we will allow him, if he's apostle, to marry. So what are the sides to look at this? What is Stadim? So maybe B'Kedushasi Koi, the Kohen retains his Kedusha of Aser, therefore he's not allowed to marry her. Or Dilma La B'Kedushasi Koi B'Shari. Maybe his Kedusha doesn't stay because he's apostle, and therefore because of that he's allowed to marry a Giyaris. Amli Rav Sheshis Tenisu, we learn. Pesua Daka Yisrael Mutter B'Nesina. Now, when it comes to a Psua Daka, not a Kayin, but a Psua Daka Nesina, a Psua Daka, who is the Israel, is allowed to marry a Nesina. Now, a Nesina is from the Zayin Umos, which are typically translated from the Givonim, who tricked into becoming part of Klal Yisrael, acting like they came from very far away, etc. If you want to tell me that a Kayin retains his Kedusha, so Ikri Kan Lutaschasin Bam, then we should also apply B'tsua Daka Yisrael Lutaschasin Bam. He says Rashi, Hechi Shari Yisrael B'Nesina. How could we possibly allow, as what we're saying, a B'tsua Daka who is Yisrael, if he's still Kadosh, how do we allow him to marry Nesina? Haksiv Lutaschasin Bam. You're not allowed to marry into them, right? So how is this allowed? So Gemara says, what do you mean? Rava atu what? Hasam mishum kedusha, vlav kedusha who? The whole issue of hotischasin bam has nothing to do with because the Israel has kedusha or not. Dilma moilid ben because the real reason is because maybe they'll have a child, but also and you're going to end up taking your child's going to end up worshiping idols. That's only when we're talking about someone who is still not Jewish, which is what the pasuk's talking about. But once they convert, B'Yisrael sharu, the Rabban will allow it. Right? It's B'Yisrael sharu. The Yisrael is allowed to marry her. Rabban who goes b'hu. Maybe even afterwards the Rabbanan are geyser, but v'chi gozer b'hu Rabbanan b'hanech de b'nei alude. Only the ones that can have a child. Avol hai de labar alude will gozer b'hu Rabbanan. What's the reason to be geyser? They can't have children anyway. The whole issue is because they may end up having them worship avodas kachavim. So that's before they were megayer. So now that they're megayer, technically it's allowed, but the Rabbanan are geyser. But you're not going to need to be geyser if someone's not able to have kids, so therefore it should be allowed. Says Rashi. It's not because of your kadosh. Hasam time in Dilma Moilid bar Plachavis Kachavim Hilkach Krabi Yosem Kachavim Ksiv. Well, this Chasim is talking dafka when the person's they're still not Jewish. When it's Gairu Sharu, but once they convert, it's allowed. The Amar Rabbanan Yisrael kosher Yisa Nesina. Why not? Is only Gezerah de Gazer. It's only Gezerah. Why? Kedamrinan Bahai Pirkas. We're going to see also in this parak on Daf Ayin Ches. David Geyser Lehen. David was Geyser upon them. Bechi Gazer Rabbanan Bahani de Abdi Oludin inhu. Only those that could actually have kids. Yomi de Isser Diraisa. The time of Mishum Alude. However, they're not able to have kids. It's not something to be concerned about. Okay. Weiter. El Miata Mamzer Debar Olude. So when it comes to a mamzer in which you could have kids, right? So hachinami de aser. So it should be aser de rabbanon. V'hatanan mamzer nesinim mutum lavozavazeh. We say that they're allowed to marry into each other. So for instance, Elo ki gaz rabbanon b'ksherim b'psul gaz rabbanon. Just push it. They're only geyser on the ksherim, but apostle the chamim not geyser. So therefore, a psul dak Yisrael is allowed to marry a Nesina, but it's not a raya whether or not the kedusha remains. When it comes to while they're not Jewish, there's no chasnos. Nisgar isu chasnos. So what does that mean? The pasuk must be talking about after gerus, since if she didn't convert, she can't be married anyway to anyone. So the language of lotus chasin bam l'chayra means don't marry them, means even though they're converts, you're not allowed to marry them. Okay, so that's an interesting point, because otherwise lotus chasin bam could mean there is no chasnos, it's not shaykh, or it means that it's someone that normally could get married because they've converted but still not. Master Rabbi Yosef is chatein Shlomo as bas paro melch Mitzrayim. We find that Shlomo Melech, who married a lot of women, one of them was the daughter of Paro. So Gemara says Giri Gaira, she converted. I thought we didn't accept any conversions. All of a sudden he's accepting a conversion. So he says the whole reason is Shulchan Malachim, says Rashi, Habas Paro lav srich lahachi shahari bas melchaisa. The whole problem was they're like, oh, they want to convert because they want to better themselves. But she's already the daughter of a king, so it's not like she's stepping up necessarily by marrying Shlomo, even obviously he was more powerful, but nonetheless, he's a king and her father was a king. So the whole midihu taima el shulchan malachim, as we continue to ayin vav amud beis, ha lo tzrichale. I thought you're supposed to wait until the third generation. So how is he allowed to marry her? So maybe, says Rashi, Mesu, maybe these died. Paro, the ones that drowned in the days of Paro. V'chi is harachmana me'erev Rav. So v'ha Tanya Rabbi Yehuda min Yomin ger mitzri haya li chaver metalmid Rabbi Kiva. Oimer ani mitzri rishain. I'm a mitzri rishain. V'nasasi mitzris rishayna. I'm married to a mitzris rishayna. Asi livni, marry my son who's mitzris sheniya. Kedei shehei ben beni roy levo kahal. So that I'll have a child, my grandchild will be able to come to the kahal. So we obviously see this is still an issue. So Amar Papa anan mishlomo leiku v'notziv. Shlomo no notziv. So according to this, he actually is saying that Shlomo Melech actually didn't marry her. Medi dechsiv bei min hagoyim asher omar Hashem el beis Yisrael lo yisavo behem vehem lo yavoi bechem achin yatu es levavchem achrei Elohehem. They turned toward their idols. Behem dovak Shlomo la'ahava. That Shlomo was attached to them li'ahava, out of love. In other words, Rashi's lo ishus. He was not actually married to them. Elakasha vis chatein. So we have the question of this pasuk vis chatein. So in this, the Gemara says, "Mitoich avi yisera she'ava malav akasav kilo nischatein ba." The fact that he loved them so much, it was like he was married to them. Omer Rabbi Ravashi v'hanan tanan patsuah dakro shavcha mutarim begiras mishachreres. It says that they're allowed to marry a convert. Mashma habanasina asiri. It's mashma that's usher. It's pretty clear. So amalei la taimech emaseifa ve'enan asurin el malava b'kahal habanasina sharu el mahan leika mashmina. You can't derive anything from our Gemara. Okay, so let's quickly see question 11. Mehem atamim hamuskar b'gemara beheter batsuah dakel and the sina. Either la b'kedushasi koi, because they don't have the kedusha, or midaraisa and isgairu sharu. Kiban delechach shash diyoyled ben depalach la'akam. B'li gozu b'yimei David behanhu delabnei oilidi diomi di iser diraisa. Okay, next Mishnah. A moini Moavi, a woman is not allowed, a surin, they're ushered to marry a man who comes from Ammon or Moab. Vesurin Isser Oilam, that's forever. However, of the Kebo Sehen Mutarais, however, the women are mutter, miyad, which means that a Jewish man is allowed to marry a Mitzri, a Moinis or a Moavis. Mitzri ve'adoimi ein an asurin el ad shloisha dairos, as we saw above. You have to wait 3 generations, and that's echad zachar echad nekevus, doesn't matter. Rav Shimon mater es an nekevus miyad. Rav Shimon, we'll have to understand why in a second, he says that women are mutter immediately. So Rav Shimon kavachaymer hadabar ma'im b'makom she'aser es zacharim, namely when it comes to Amnon Moav. Is an oilam forever? Hitter as in the kavus miyad. You're allowed to marry the Adaimis or the Moavis immediately. So makam shloyaser as zacharim el ad shloish adaris by Mitzri and Edaim. Eno din she not there as in the kavus miyad. So malo no im halacha nekabel v'im ladin ish tshuva. So he said there is a response. Says Rashi, im ladin shi'ata don kavachayim atzmacha yesh tshuva slahashib. There's answers to this. Yesh tshuva. Armohem lo ki halacha ni oimer. Actually, I say this through halacha. Says Rashi, shematim rabosecha. I heard this from my teachers. It's not from a kavachayim only. I actually heard it from my teachers. Okay. So minahanimili. So how do we know all of this our Mishnah said, which this was actually question 12. Clean question. A moinis v'adaimis mehen levo b'kahal. I'm not sure how that question's read, but we know a man is not allowed, but a woman is, a nekevus, a moinis is allowed. A daimis is either the 3rd generation or miyad for nekevus. It says, v'kirish Shaul es David, when Shaul saw David, he was worried about David. Yaitzalikras haplishti. He went to greet the Plishti. Amar el Avner sar hatzava. So he went to Avner and said, Ben mizeh hanar. Who is this nar related to? Avner. V'yomer Avner Chei nafshecha hamelach im yadaiti. I swear, I don't know. V'yadalei. Is it true that Avner didn't know the status of David? V'ksiv v'yehavehu ma'oid. He loved him very much. V'hilo naisa kelim. And he was the one who was the holder of his weaponry. So he obviously did know about David. Ella avua kamashal. He wasn't asking about him. He was asking about his father. The he didn't know his father. But the man in the days of Shaul Zakin Bob Anoshim V'yomer Marvi Tema Rabbi Abba Ze Yishai Yavi David Shenichnas Be'ulkasa B'yatzav Ulkasa. He was able to gather up 600,000 people, and he was a very well-known person. So it's not possible that he didn't know who he was either. So Hachikar Shaul. This is actually what Shaul was asking. He was wondering, Im Peretz Asi, Im Zerach Asi. He wanted to know, does he come from Peretz or does he come from Zerach? What is the difference? So the Gemara explains, Im Peretz Asi Malka Havoy. If he comes from Peretz, he could become a king. I'm worried about that. Shamelach Poiretz Lasais Derech Vein Mamchin Biyadai. Just like a king is allowed to breach walls and no one can protest it, so that's, if he comes from Peretz, that is going to be a problem to me. Ima Zerachasi, if he comes from Zerach, then Chashiva Ba'al Mahavi. He's just a Chashiva guy. But Lav Davka, is he someone who's is going to be a threat to my throne? Fine, which is T. Let's see, Matam TA 29. Kuros Shaul Omer El Avner Tsar Hatzava Ben Mize Hanar Ma Haisa Shalaso Shal Shaul. What was his question? Fine, and what's the nafkamina? TA 29. Okay, so again, he wanted to know, is he going to be a king? So my time Omerle Shaul Shalale. So my time Omerle Shaul Nechsiv V'yalbe Shaul as David, because Shaul dressed David, Madav Kamidato, that his armor was like his armor. It fit him somehow. So the question, how did his armor fit David? So it was a miracle, because David was not as tall as Shaul. Armali Doig Hadoimi. So Doig Hadoimi said, 1 second. Ad Shi'ata Mashalav Im Hogun Hula Malchusim Lav. You're so worried if he's going to become the next king. Shalav Im Roilav Bakahal Imav. He may not even be able to marry a regular Yid. Forget about becoming a king. My time to cost him Rus Moaviyah, because David comes from Rus. Armali Avner. So Avner said, yeah, but that's not an issue. Tanina Amoini V'Amoinis Moavi Moavis. So Avner said that you're allowed to marry a Moavis woman. Almiyata mamzer vo mamzeris. So does that mean you can also marry mamzeris? No, mamzer ksiv mumzar. It means a strange blemish. Mitzri vo mitzris. So shani hachan mafarish time in the Quran. The pasuk actually says it explicitly. Ala shelo kidmu eschem belechem amayim darkashal ish lekadim vo darkashal isha lekadim. So it says explicitly, the reason for this is because the men were not helpful. However, when it came to the women, they're not held accountable. What do you mean? Maybe the men should help the men, the women should help the women. So immediately after that, the king said, Sholata ben es mize helam hasam kari le nar hacha kari le elem. So what exactly over here? First he was called a nar. Now all of a sudden he's calling an elem, this different name. So hachi kari le halacha nis alma mimcha, has the obviously halacha has been hidden from you. Say ushal bebeis medrash shal. So go and ask. Shal armele amoinis moavi moavis. So that's what they ended up paskening as we continue to Ayin Zayin Amid Aleph. So Akshel hu doyeg kol hani kushiyasa. He asked all these different questions, as we said before. Ishtiku, and they're quiet. Boy lachruzi ale miad. So they wanted to announce it right away. And then va'amasa ben ish, there was Amasa ben ish shmo Yisra HaYisraeli asher ba el Abigail bas Nachash. Uksiv, it also says, in addition to Amasa, there's Yeser HaYisraeli. Amrava Mulamid Shechagar Charbo Kishmael, that he girded his sword just like a Ishmaelite. Yomer Kol Mi She'enu Shemeh Halacha Zu. Anyone who doesn't teach me this halacha, Yedakir B'cherev, you are going to be killed with the sword. Kach Mechavona B'mis Dino Shel Shmuel Haramasi Amoinis Moabi Vo Moabis. So on this Umima Himon, was he truly believed? Ba'omer Rabbi Abba Omer Rav Kol Talmud Chacham Shemar Halacha. Any Talmud Chacham who paskins. Uva then comes Im Koidem Ma'isa Amra Shaimin Lo. The Imlav Ein Shaimin Lo. The question is, this already happened, so it shouldn't work. Says Rashi, Shabas Hayurab Yadai, a psak came into your hand, Amra B'shan La Talmida B'Beis Medrash B'Shem Rabba Shaimin Lo B'Shas Hara. V'imlav in Shaimin Lo Shema Machmas Ma'isa Habol Yadai Imra. Maybe you're only saying this because of the Ma'isa that happened, and you're only posketing this situation because of it happening. So Shani Hacha Dekashol Daha Shmuel Ubeis Dino Kayim. Says Rashi, Umil said Yavid Liguyehu V'Lomeshakarba. It was obviously something that was already to be known, and it's not something which potentially could have been a lie. Mikol Makam Kasha. Women should have given food to the women. So Hacha Targimu Kol Kvaida Basmelch Penima. That when it comes to women, they are able to be inside. So we see again this notion of a women should not be held accountable. Question 13. Who are the people that said in front of Shaul, should David kosher lavobakal mishum to Moavis? So one was Avner, which we saw on Ayin Vav Beis, and also Amasa ben Ish. Amasa is the other person. Okay, it's hard to remember it was Amasa, but that's the answer. Okay, T.A. Let's say TA29 we did, and question 30. I guess we just did this too also. Madua kibu es eduso shel Amasa. Why did they accept the testimony of Amasa based in Shel Shmuel, from the based of Shmuel? Shemoini v'lamoinis v'hari tamnu chacham shmor halacha la'achar ma'aseh in shaimin lo. You shouldn't listen to him. Shani hacha to Shmuel based in Kayim, because Shmuel and his based in is Kayim, so you can always just go there, and it would obviously be that issue would be clarified. And since it's a milsa diavidali guye, obviously it's not something that he is lying about. TB, that was TA30, TB30, Matam demandi armor batsua daka mutabigyaris. So the reason why is mutabigyaris the kal ger moikri kahal, umatam de af imhu kayin muteris lo the inosur mishum zaina kayin la b'kedushasi koy the dino ki Yisrael. Adkan.